Everybody loves Steve, and they respect him, and they somehow can relate to him. I've known him for many years, and I've seen it over and over again.
להוציא את חבר הכנסת עודה, להוציא אותו מהאולם, להוציא אותו מיד, החוצה, החוצה.
Please expel this Knesset member. Please expel this Knesset member.
להוציא גם את חבר הכנסת כסיף. להוציא את חבר הכנסת כסיף מהאולם.
Expel Knesset member Kasif out of the hall. Please expel him immediately.
You're watching this live footage with us of the Israeli parliament as two apparent Knesset members were expelled. It's unclear exactly why, but we'll get that detail for you as we continue to listen to President Trump.
I think the scariest thing about Trump isn't what he did, it's what he proved. He proved how easy it is to break a country when you make people choose between truth and belonging. He proved that if you're loud enough, you can drown out facts. And he proved that millions will follow you not because they believe in you, but because you make them feel seen in their anger. Donald Trump's recent visit to the Middle East was marked by controversial remarks and interactions, highlighting strained geopolitical dynamics and domestic political turmoil in the United States. While speaking at Israel's Knesset, Trump faced protests, but also criticized previous U.S. administrations for their handling of Middle East peace processes, particularly accusing Barack Obama and Joe Biden of fostering hostility toward Israel. His meetings with Middle Eastern leaders, including Egypt's president and UAE officials, involved unusual praise and bizarre behavior, such as commending Egypt's low crime rates and referencing the UAE's wealth in strange terms. These interactions raised questions about Trump's foreign policy motives, especially given the UAE's substantial financial ties to his family business and the transfer of sensitive semiconductor technology. Domestically, Trump's administration is embroiled in a government shutdown crisis, with Republican leaders refusing to negotiate with Democrats and pushing fear-based narratives about upcoming No Kings protests. Treasury and Transportation secretaries issued misleading statements, framing peaceful protests as threats to paychecks and government stability, while also promoting ambitious space exploration plans like establishing a moon base powered by nuclear fission. Congressional Republicans, led by figures like MAGA Mike Johnson, defended their absence from Washington, claiming ongoing work and blaming Democrats for the shutdown, even as millions of Americans face economic hardship, healthcare insecurity, and layoffs, particularly in critical areas like special education. The summary also reveals the Republican Party's lack of a coherent healthcare plan, with leadership expressing frustration over efforts to repeal Obamacare without presenting viable alternatives. This political standoff exacerbates public anxiety about healthcare affordability and government functionality. The video ends by underscoring the broader political chaos, including Trump's contentious alliances and rhetoric, which further complicate both domestic and international relations. Donald Trump met with Egypt's president, and he spoke there. Egypt's leader, Donald Trump, praised him for Egypt being essentially a better place than governors in the United States, and Egypt being better than the U.S. What a horrific thing to say overseas. Here, play this clip.
We're in a country where a friend of mine is a very powerful leader, and my friend is right here, the president, also the general, you know. Sometimes I call him, usually I call him the general because he's both, and he's good at both. And they've done a fantastic job, and they have very little crime, you know. Because they don't play games, that's why. They don't play games like we do in the United States with governors that have no idea what they're doing. But they don't have crime. I ask about crime and they almost don't even know what I'm talking about. So it's a great tribute to this man. He's done a fantastic job in bringing this country together. This took 3,000 years to get to this point. Can you believe it? And it's going to hold up, too. It's going to hold up.
Let's get back to Caitlin. He was just wrapping up with some of the things we heard him say time and time again as he's had microphones throughout the day, Caitlin. But again, just the importance I mentioned the imagery, and then of course the substance, which is, we believe, as you said, signing on to this 20-point deal, which, even though we don't know what is going to really come next, what's going to take hold, just the idea of all of these people in one room in Sharm el-Sheikh signing on to any document is a very big deal.
Yeah, and this is something that Steve Witkoff, one of the president's top aides, hammered out the details of what those 20 points were going to look like. I mean, we saw draft versions where small things were changed or some points were entirely crossed out as they were working on this. And the president joked before he left here in Israel that, you know, given how late he was, maybe these world leaders would leave and they wouldn't wait on him to sign these documents. He showed up more than 4 hours late, Dana, but obviously they are all still there, including the ones who helped broker this deal at the table, leaders from Qatar, from Egypt, from Turkey, sitting with the president, as they were the ones who helped really get this deal over the line last week when the president came out on Thursday and confirmed that the ceasefire had been agreed to, and obviously we saw it take place, and then leading to that culmination with the 20 hostages who are still alive being released from Hamas's captivity today for the first time in over 2 years. And while certainly there are many steps ahead with the rest of what this plan that the president has envisioned and that he has gotten these other world leaders to sign on to looks like, one thing that he was referencing there is that there's been moments before where someone was unhappy with an agreement or someone didn't like part of it. The president feels like he has accomplished in this, where at least there are leaders from the Arab world in agreement with this, and as they have been pushing for it. I still think there are questions, as we heard Prime Minister Netanyahu say earlier. He is committed to this peace, exactly what that's going to look like, because there are parts in this peace deal that Netanyahu doesn't agree with, including the formation eventually of a Palestinian state, something that he was just ruling out, Dana, a month ago when he was in New York. And so obviously a lot of things to watch closely here. But the president clearly emboldened by today and relishing in this moment of what was a huge foreign policy goal of his when he re-entered the Oval Office. Yeah, and has been a foreign policy goal for presidents for decades. Obviously, this time is very different because there was very much a hot war, and that has now, for the time being, and hopefully for a very long time, has come to an end. Caitlin, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Now to my panel, Kim Dozier, I'm going to start with you, because let's talk about why all of those world leaders together at that summit signing on to this is so critical for what happens next. Because Hamas is certainly degraded, but they're not gone. We are already getting reports of some violence inside Gaza, and this has to do with Hamas going after those who dared to sort of speak up against them during while the war was going on. And in order for something to stick, all of the people in that room have to have skin in the game. I don't mean troops, but effort with economic aid, and at least using their power to make something happen.
Yeah, look, I can walk you through chapter and verse all of the reasons why this will probably fall apart very soon.
Let's not do that.
But what President Trump is trying to do in that room with that Peace 2025 banner is bind everyone together into this promise that we're all going to use our influence, our nation-state power to make this happen. It is also a signal to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu that you will not annex Gaza. Your troops may never leave this buffer zone, but you're not going to make Gaza part of Israel. So it's a dual message, and it also hopefully creates the momentum that pushes people over the line on some of the hard questions, like who's going to give their troops to go into this dangerous buffer area where they might be under fire from Gaza, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or caught in between this internecine warfare between warring Palestinian factions that's now breaking out?
There are the list of reasons to be pessimistic is extremely long, but there are certain fundamental things in place right now that should give us real, genuine reasons to feel like something is possible. I mean, for starters, Iran is severely weakened, and Iran was the force that made Hamas possible, that made Hezbollah possible. Israel has very good reason to feel self-confident right now as it enters into these negotiations because it has demonstrated its superiority in the region. I think back to the 1990s and what happened that made peace possible, a peace process possible then. So you had the collapse of the Soviet Union, much like the collapse of Iran. You had an American president who was much more popular than any Israeli politician in Israel. Trump is able to speak over the heads of the Israelis, and he gives them an incredible amount of confidence that he has their back.
I mean, just look at one example of, if you were sleeping and you weren't up to see this or haven't seen it on social media, just one example of what happened inside the crowds on the streets of Israel when President Trump was there earlier today, the crowds all thanking him. I think we have that to play. Let's play it now.
After 2 harrowing years in darkness and captivity, 20 courageous hostages are returned.
Thank you, President Trump, for that.
So that's an example, and all night last night you saw lots of signs and banners thanking President Trump for that. You mentioned Iran, and I think that's, and I'm going to bring you in, Kristen, to talk more about the president. But the fact that he talked several times, as he's been in front of microphones since last night, about Iran and about maybe wanting or thinking that Iran is going to change. I mean, we'll see. But what's at the heart of this is that Iran has been the chief sponsor of Hamas, of Hezbollah. And so he needs, and the world needs, Iran to continue to be on its heels in order to fully topple Hamas and Hezbollah. And so that's clearly what that was part of.
Well, and there is this coalition of Sunni states that was in the front row of that, and they were the ones who were able to ultimately really put the squeeze on Hamas, because Iran is out of the picture as far as Hamas is concerned, or it's been minimized. And you have Turkey and you have Qatar, and they reached this collective decision that they needed to squeeze Hamas and force Hamas into this deal. And they will continue to have that kind of leverage over Hamas. It's not perfect because they're not Hamas's masters, but Trump needs those strongmen. It was a strongman's performance to an audience of strongmen that we just witnessed in Sharm el-Sheikh, and I think that gives him the momentum.
And President Trump is, to keep your analogy going, the chief strongman there in the middle with the big chair.
Yeah, and I do think that one thing to note here, we're talking a lot about these different strongmen. We're talking a lot about the reason why we might be pessimistic versus optimistic. But if you want to side on the side of optimism, you would look at what President Trump has done in this negotiation that leaders before never did, which was engaging in places like Qatar, engaging with Erdogan. For various reasons, whether you think they should or shouldn't, there's been reluctance to engage with any of these parties. I mean, as we know, obviously Hamas was in Qatar as recently as the strike, so that was one of the reasons that leaders never wanted to engage. But the fact that he's willing to kind of put some of this aside to move forward in a different direction shows you that this is a different kind of negotiation space that we are entering. And again, whether you like it or not, at this point, as you're mentioning with Erdogan and with Qatar, I mean, it's helping with that process.
Yeah, and there's no question that the word that I've heard all morning, and there's a reason for it, is the word momentum. And that's what you were referring to, is that they just want to keep this momentum going.
I think the scariest thing about Trump isn't what he did, it's what he proved. He proved how easy it is to break a country when you make people choose between truth and belonging. He proved that if you're loud enough, you can drown out facts. And he proved that millions will follow you not because they believe in you, but because you make them feel seen in their anger. He didn't invent cruelty, he just made it fashionable again. He made people proud of the worst parts of themselves. The insults, the lies, the mocking, it wasn't politics anymore. It was an identity. And when the system tried to stop him, the courts, the press, the voters, he turned their resistance into proof of persecution. That's what makes him dangerous. not his power, but his ability to convince others they're powerless without him. He showed every aspiring strongman on earth that democracy doesn't need to be destroyed. It just needs to be mocked until it collapses on its own. And when that happens, we won't need another Trump, because we'll already be living in his aftermath. Maybe that's Trump's true legacy. Not his buildings, not his rallies, not his wealth, but the lesson he left behind. That democracy doesn't die in darkness. It dies in daylight, cheered on by people who think they're saving it. The next time the crowd chants for strength over truth or loyalty over law, they won't be cheering for Trump. They'll be cheering for the idea he left behind, that power is its own morality. And that's the danger that lingers.